5 Live Formula One.
Yes, Formula One returns after an unexpected week off. The Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix in Imola was called off due to severe flooding last week, and now we head to Monaco for the jewel in the crown of the F1 season. Can anyone stop Max Verstappen? Will Mercedes' upgrade work? And where does Lewis Hamilton's future lie? We'll discuss all of this and more across the next half an hour on 5 Live Formula One. I'm Eleanor Oldroyd, and I'm joined by 5 Live F1 commentator Jack Nicholls, former F1 driver Jolyon Palmer, and pit lane reporter Rosanna Tennant. Hello all, I should say, first of all, that I'm very excited to be in the studio face-to-face with Jack Nicholls. When you're
Not many people say that.
When you're normally talking from somewhere very glamorous, but we are here in the studio together. But Rosanna, you are actually there, aren't you? You're in the paddock. Paint us a picture.
I am. I'd love to be in the studio with you as well, but someone's got to do Jack's dirty work. So I am here in Monaco, and what a day it has been. It started off with some rain, which got everybody quite excited about the race weekend to come. We've got the chance of rain across the weekend, I think. But it's been a beautiful afternoon, sun blazing, the boats glistening in the harbour, and everybody just starting to get really excited to go racing because, of course, as you say, we've had a little bit of a bigger hiatus than we were expecting since the last race in Miami, so we can't wait to get going again.
It's one of the iconic race weekends in F1, isn't it, Jack? So what makes it so special?
I think it is just unique. I think if you now, in 2023, said, right, we want to put on a race, instead of Vegas, we want to put on this race in Monaco, it's on these tight, twisty streets, and you can barely overtake, and you can barely get any cars past each other, and it's just insanity, the circuit. You'd never get it signed off. But because the idea was in 1929 from Anthony Noakes and the world was a different place back then, it started. And, you know, we've had almost 100 years now of the Monaco Grand Prix, and I just love it. There's difficulties with it. There are arguments about, is it actually a great race? Is it really that entertaining? And all of those kind of things. But I think just in terms of the history of the place, I think it's phenomenal.
Do you get a sense, Johnny, when you drive that circuit, that it is more about the occasion than the race itself? I mean, what's it like as a driver?
I think the occasion is enormous. I mean, it's a standalone weekend. It really is something else. As Jack said, it's bonkers to be driving around the narrow walls. It's really undulating. It's so tight. It is absolute madness to be driving around there in a Formula One car, and it would never happen now. If a new circuit was trying to get a green light and try and replicate Monaco, it would be laughed out of town. But that's why it's so cool. The history, the tradition means that we stay there. We're still on the calendar. And, yeah, overtaking is tough. But it's still, I think it's still the race that you want to win. The number one race to win is the Monaco Grand Prix.
Yeah, I remember interviewing Sir Stirling Moss, the late Sir Stirling Moss, a few years ago, where he was talking about actually pulling up during practice and handing his number or the number of his hotel to a pretty girl that he'd seen down by Casino or somewhere like that. And that's the kind of the image that I get in my head, Jack, about the race itself and the celebrity factor. And Rosanna can tell us about the celeb spotting that she's been doing. It might be a bit early, actually, on Thursday to spot the celebs.
Not too many.
They haven't helicoptered in or brought the yachts in yet. But is that what it is? It's the history. It's that kind of sense of Formula One as it was.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I very much, and I think Palmer's similar. I'm very much a Monaco apologist, right? In that I think, you have new fans coming in now and even old fans, to be honest, who think it's a complete waste of time, the Monaco Grand Prix. It's a ridiculous procession. And yeah, it's a waste of time. But my counter to that, and Jolyon's better placed for this, but my counter to that is the Saturday of Monaco, the qualifying day where you're on the track by yourself going 110%, is one of the greatest spectacles in motorsport for my money. And even I remember a couple of years ago, we sent Jolyon down to stand by the track, and he's obviously driven the track and raced the track, but standing by the track, he loved it, Didn't you?
It was cool. It was really cool, yeah. But you don't. When you're driving, you don't get the chance to watch firsthand. You're either in the cockpit or you're in the garage or something. So going trackside in Monaco, I think it was amazing how narrow the walls are from the outside. The speeds that you're doing when you're in the car, you're so absorbed in the moment that you don't really think of anything else apart from the next corner, the braking point, your gear shifts and everything. When you're trackside and you're watching it, it was just mind-blowing. Even to me, having raced it, you think, wow, this is the pinnacle of Formula One here, is driving around Monaco. So yeah, I'm with Jack. I think it should stay on the calendar. And even as difficult as it is to overtake, you've still got to put everything together to win in Monaco. It is not easy. Qualifying is the most dramatic qualifying of the year. You always get incident. It is cars absolutely on the ragged edge, hustling around 19 corners with the barriers around everywhere. And you'll always get crashes. You'll always get moments, and the heroes will be at the front of the grid. But even then, we've seen the last couple of years, there's no guarantee that you can win it. OK, overtaking is pretty hard on track, but you've got to get the strategy right. You've got to have reliability, and you've got to not do something clumsy from the cockpit as well. So there's more to it than I think a lot of probably maybe the newer fans would see. And yeah, it's a cracking occasion.
Rosanna, so who are you expecting to see arriving over the next few days? Presumably the drivers just kind of wandering around and, picking up their laundry and going to the supermarket, aren't they? Because that's where half of them live.
Absolutely. It's a home race for so many of them. It's a short commute. They can sleep in their own beds, which I think changes the weekend somewhat for them. They were being asked earlier if it was therefore a more relaxing weekend. I don't think it is. And I think because of all the reasons Jolien's just listed, it's still super intense. So nice to wake up in your own bed, but you're taking on streets that you normally drive in a road car, in a Formula One car. So it's altogether different. And yet you're right. The Formula One drivers sort of blend in because there are so many celebrities across the weekend, and it's just a who's who, really, the guest list. Stars from the music world, the acting world, the sports world as well. I think everybody, if they're offered the chance to come, they take that invitation and they get themselves here. Not on the Thursday. They'll be here on the Sunday, I think.
Absolutely. You don't have to kind of book in early or, avoid the traffic or anything like that when you're that kind of level. We'll come back to the race, obviously, itself. But Jack, just kind of fill us in on the last week and how challenging that's been, because with the cancellation of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix because of the flooding, and very much a sense of concern from the broader community for the victims of the flooding.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a well, on the one hand, a no-brainer to cancel the Grand Prix, but also, ultimately unavoidable because, parts of the circuit were flooded, and that paled into insignificance compared to the wider flooding around the region, in the town of Imola itself, in the town of Faenza, which was about 20 minutes up the road, which is where the Alpha Tauri team were based. And I think Formula One, came together and made that sensible decision. Formula One has donated €1 million to a relief fund for the disaster, and I think we all just hope to be back at Imola next year. And it was a real shame the Grand Prix got cancelled, but ultimately unavoidable, and sadly these things happen, and sadly these things happen more and more, but that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, I think everybody's excited to be at Monaco, and there's a few interesting things, because so many teams were planning new upgrades for Imola, or we were going to find out a bit more about the pecking order, and then we jumped to a completely kind of unique circuit in Monaco, which kind of came up quicker than everyone was anticipating almost.
Jolien, does it impact the drivers? Does it impact the teams having, apart from, as Jack has just mentioned, the plans that they had in place for Imola, which we'll come back to when it comes to Mercedes in a minute. But do the drivers like having a weekend off, or does it mess with their heads a bit?
I think because it was quite a late call. I mean, it wasn't particularly late. They probably, most of them wouldn't have been out, or would have just been flying, or it would have been travel day basically on Wednesday when it was officially called off. But still, they would have had to get their preparation done for Imola. And so for the drivers and then the teams as well, there was a lot at stake actually for Imola, because it was due to be the first European race. There was upgrades coming to loads of cars. There was big chances for drivers to make inroads and do their own thing in the championship, whether it's Verstappen trying to stamp his authority at the front of the championship before coming to Monaco, which maybe would be a Perez track, or it could be drivers further down that need a good result like Nick de Vries. But now he's coming to Monaco as his next race, and he's on a bit of a tough time. So Monaco's not a good track for him. So there's sort of ramifications all round. I think when there's 23 races on the calendar and you lose one, it's obviously sad, the situation in Imola, and that's a whole topic that Jack covered off. But I think to have a 22 race season is still plenty for everyone.
Well, Lewis Hamilton, 7 times world champion, of course, is certainly going to be hoping that his Mercedes is improved this weekend. But there were reports earlier this week in Italian newspaper La Gazzetta dello Sport that the Brit had received an offer to join Ferrari. Hamilton today has rejected those reports. Let's see what he had to say.
Yeah, I think naturally with when you're in contract negotiations, there's always going to be speculation. And I think ultimately that's, unless you hear from me, then that's what it is. So,
where do you think these stories have come from?
Well, there's a certain individual in this room that's written at least one of them, but yeah, I don't know. I think maybe with the weekend, last weekend with the race being cancelled, maybe they just got bored and started to. Yeah, I think, as I said, my team's like working closely behind the scenes with Toto. We're almost at the end of having the contract ready, so they're having the team focus on that, so I can just do my job. It's a much better position than I was in before, because I remember I used to do all my negotiations on my own, and it was very stressful. So I don't have to do that anymore.
Well, that was Tom Clarkson asking the questions to Lewis Hamilton there. Hamilton to Ferrari. I've got to say that I mentioned this to an Italian friend earlier on today, and he kind of went, why would he do that? And he said, I know, but maybe he would do it because the end of his career, he's got nothing else to prove. I mean, you can see that it could happen, but was it ever likely to happen, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, Tom did his best there to get a bit of something out of Lewis, didn't he? And the reports were that John Elkann, the overall boss of Ferrari, was, looking at making the bid. And you have to say, if you're the boss of Ferrari looking at making the bid, like, that's a sensible thing to do, right? If you're running a team and there's the chance that you can get one of the best drivers, if not the best driver in history, it's worth considering. And I think it would have, I don't know. I'd have loved it. I think it would have been phenomenal to see Hamilton go to Ferrari. Because, Rosanna, I swear we've spoken about Hamilton to Ferrari for years.
It's one that everybody, I think, must want to happen, because it's always one that makes the headlines, whether it's a rogue journalist writing a headline in a dull moment in a jam-packed Formula One season, or whether it's just people wanting to see out a Formula One driver like Lewis race for the Formula One team, Ferrari. I think that's the link-up that people want to see. But it's interesting, isn't it, that Lewis doesn't seem to be tempted. Maybe he has been in the past, but certainly not now. And I think this afternoon it was interesting, whilst he was saying no to the rumours that have been abounding, he was also telling us he's nearly there with a contract for Mercedes. I think that's huge news.
What a shame. I was honestly getting quite excited at the prospect of Lewis going to Ferrari. I really was.
Did you believe it?
I think it would... you know what I do believe? With these things, there's often no smoke without fire. So maybe it was a pie-in-the-sky conversation that happened between a Ferrari representative and Lewis. It's very rare that someone just absolutely makes up a story like this. I mean, I know we're in the era of fake news and the rest of it, but the Italian sources are normally okay about Ferrari matters as well. So, I didn't completely disregard it, but whether or not, Hamilton would ever choose to go to Ferrari, an approach being made is different to an agreement being made. But wow, it would just be amazing for Formula One. Lewis is at a stage now where he's a 7-time champ and he's got George Russell coming alongside him in Mercedes. There's not that competitive. And if he went to Ferrari, it could be the last hurrah. If somehow he could get Ferrari back to winning ways, then we won't even be saying potentially one of the best ever drivers. That would be best ever driver.
Was that a direct impression? Was that felt a bit harsh?
It was all right.
I tell you what my Italian friend actually said, and I'm not going to try and do an accent here and do an impression. He said, why would he not want to drive a Ferrari?
Yeah.
Wouldn't everyone want to drive a Ferrari?
Yeah, exactly. Sebastian Vettel always said that everyone's favourite team secretly is Ferrari, and everybody wants to drive for Ferrari secretly. And I just agree. It would be so cool to see Hamilton in a Ferrari in the sort of last few years of his career, it would be awesome. But I think we need more of this kind of journalism,
also,
right? We need more. BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson, needs to get just making stuff up a bit more because it creates good.
He's not good at the gossip.
He's not. He's just like, well, if it's not true, I'm not going to write it, which I guess is respectable, but it's a bit boring.
Hey, listen, that's not what you get here.
No, exactly.
Wild
On the front
speculation
foot,
on 5
Benson.
Live Formula 1. Well, I
But
mean,
you know, just on,
Julian, sorry.
Just quickly on this, in previous times, there were times in, I think, 2018, 19, where Ferrari were also knocking on the door for Lewis before Leclerc joined. And you just felt like he'd have a lot to lose to go to Ferrari. Whereas now,
because he was in the best
feel like
car
he's got so much to
comfortably.
lose. Yeah, he was in the best car. He was embedded within a absolute, titan of a team. But they're not that right now. They're making changes behind the scenes. Again, there's George Russell coming alongside Lewis, who's also maybe Mercedes looking at as the star of the future. They're very evenly matched overall. But I feel like, the whole momentum of Hamilton and Mercedes, it has clearly stalled the last couple of years. Ferrari's not much better, but he's got basically less to lose to go to another team that's vying to try and catch Red Bull. So that's why part of it made sense. But hey, it doesn't look like it's going to be happening as yet.
We should talk about these changes to the Mercedes, shouldn't we, Rosanna? What are they, and are we going to see them make any difference at all around Monaco?
Yeah, there are some quite big changes coming to the Mercedes, and I think a lot of people are questioning why they're bringing them this weekend. And I spoke to George earlier on, George Russell, and he said, in fact, because they plan to bring them to Imola, they can't just go back and go back to a sort of previous iteration of cars. So in a way, do they feel that they're slightly stuck and they kind of had to bring them? But there's going to be new bodywork that you can see, a new floor, lots being made about their side pods, the sort of side of the car that didn't really exist on the Mercedes before. They've now got a bit more of a traditional side pod, a bit more like the Red Bulls. So I think there are going to be lots of changes, but George was also quick to say that, they're not going to draw a lot of conclusions from this weekend. They're still going to try and learn, but a circuit like Monaco, slow speed, high risk of accidents, it's a tricky weekend to bring an upgrade to. You need to be very careful you bring it home in one piece. And I think all eyes should probably be on the Spanish Grand Prix in just over a week's time, when we can really get a read on what these upgrades have brought to their performance.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. In theory, the upgrades will make the car better and quicker, and so it will be better and quicker in Monaco also. But it's just quantifying that'll be the challenge, I imagine, Jolyon.
Yeah, exactly. It's just such a different circuit. The thing is with Monaco, you change the car so much anyway. Compared to the first races that we've only had low downforce tracks with really long straights. Baku, Miami, Melbourne now is all about top speed. Monaco, they're chalk and cheese with everything we've had so far. So it's not like we've even had a Barcelona or another high downforce circuit that they can even benchmark anything off. And you've got the walls there that if either driver or any driver with upgrades hits a wall, often there's not spare parts to go on that car. So you have to change configuration, and it all sort of muddies the waters. So Mercedes obviously think it's worth doing, and is a big step for them to completely change their philosophy. But yeah, I don't think, as Rosanna said, I don't think we'll get a complete picture of just how good it is. I mean, maybe they'll romp the Grand Prix and we'll get excited for them. But I'd be surprised if that happens here. I think Barcelona, as Rosanna said, would be the one.
Well, let's turn our attention to Red Bull coming to this weekend. Of course, having won every race so far this season. So will they be the dominant car again? Let's hear from both of their drivers. In a moment, Max Verstappen, but first, here's Sergio Perez.
We certainly know that it's not our strongest circuit, no? Where we will struggle a bit to show our strengths, but it's still Monaco. I think come Saturday, you really need a good warm-up on your tire. That definitely is the key around here. And I just have to say that, let's say it's not our strongest circuit, but we will see. It's still Monaco and anything can happen.
Max, last year there was so much controversy that came out of this race weekend for you guys as a team. How are you working with the team to ensure that won't ever happen again here in Monaco, especially this weekend?
Things that happened in the past, they happen, we've spoken about it, but, we just focus on having a clean weekend. We know that qualifying is very important, and putting the lap in when it matters is definitely very crucial.
Does that mean that you're going to get preferential treatment this weekend for qualifying, getting out there?
No, we always swap around every weekend who goes out first, right? I don't know if other teams do that, but that's how we always do it. So there is no preferential treatment. It's just how we set up throughout the year. You know, the first race, one starts ahead in quali to go out the box, and then we just keep alternating. I don't even know who is out first around here because I don't remember how it was in Miami, but we'll find out. It shouldn't be a problem normally.
So it's all about the intra-team battle, isn't it, between Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen? You referred to it there, Rosanna, in your questions to both drivers, but it was this weekend last year, wasn't it? Just kind of remind us what happened and what has caused this beef.
Absolutely. Well, Sergio Perez is deemed to have crashed on purpose, which then led to Max Verstappen being unable to challenge properly, sort of in the full qualifying conditions. So Max seems to think that that was done on purpose. Jolyon, I think you've looked at the data and you have your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I concur.
Yeah.
I think it looks pretty dodgy.
Have you seen
a load of steering lock on.
Have you seen the data and stuff? I didn't realise that.
I have had a look at the data. Yeah, it looks fishy, and obviously the Red Bull saw this immediately. Max would have seen it straight after qualifying, and he basically turns into the corner, more steering lock, and wellies the throttle in an unusual manner.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. But
and
I think
then led to more controversy later on in the season when Max was asked to help Checo in Brazil, and he didn't allow Checo to make the pass, and he then referred back to what we now know was the Monaco incident, which perhaps not many of us knew about at the time, this time last year. So it's just interesting. Qualifying here in Monaco has had history of drivers perhaps stopping in places where they didn't need to, and that having implications on the result of qualifying. And as we've spoken about before, qualifying is so important here in Monaco. Saturday is almost more important than the race because often overtaking is so difficult that you perhaps start or finish where you start. So I think Red Bull just need to be on top of things, but I'm sure Max Verstappen has had a word or two since this time last year, as he said to me this afternoon.
But Perez was quick here last year. Like, I think all coming in through that weekend, it was like, oh, maybe Perez can be a championship challenger because he, like this year, had a strong start to the season. He was quicker than Verstappen in certainly most of the practice sessions. Okay, it looked like Verstappen was going to out-qualify him at the end until Perez's crash. But I don't think you can rule out Perez this weekend because of the form he's in. I think everyone's favourite is still Verstappen, but you can't rule Perez out.
It's part of the history of F1, isn't it, Jolyon, that you've got rivalries between teammates. How do you characterise this particular one between these two?
To be honest, I'd put it in with the Bottas-Hamilton rivalry that lasts a third of a season and then fizzles out. That's all we've seen so far. But I do think Perez has got a chance this weekend because he's always been strong in Monaco. Won last year, was quicker than Max last year. And so, yeah, he's got a chance this weekend. And I feel like for Perez, it's just how long can he keep the fight going? And the longer he keeps it going, the more things can happen. The pressure can build on Verstappen and their side of the garage. And then a DNF would be suddenly Perez is into the lead and you can build momentum. But I just feel overall Verstappen is the stronger driver, and he's just such a good driver. That's the thing. It's not really a slight on Perez. He's up against someone that we'll probably look back on as a driver maybe in the Hamilton, Schumacher, Senna level of talent. He's shown it all his career, Verstappen. So it's tough for Perez, but this weekend is a chance for him. He's always been good here. So
who is most likely to stop the Red Bulls, if anyone? Jack, Charles Leclerc?
Well, I'm interested to see what Ferrari can do this weekend because Leclerc he took pole position, didn't he, in Baku earlier this year? Okay, it's a little bit different, but it's still a street circuit. He has taken pole in Monaco before, but has never managed to convert it into a victory. In fact, I don't think he's seen the checkered flag in any of his Monaco Grand Prix appearances. I don't think it's... and the thing is, when Leclerc took pole for Ferrari in Baku, he couldn't keep the Red Bulls behind. But if he can qualify ahead of them here, it's really difficult to overtake, as we've discussed previously. He should have won last year, but they messed up with the rain and the wet strategy. So I think Leclerc has got a shot. I think he's the one to look out for in terms of stopping Red Bulls.
Who are you looking at, Rosanna, from where you are?
I think I'm looking out for Fernando Alonso. He said this
I didn't
afternoon.
even think of him. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin saying today that, he'd be lying if he said that he didn't think he could win here. And he's got the experience. He's won here before, so perhaps that was what he was alluding to. But I think Aston Martin are well placed this weekend to trouble Red Bull. I think it's one of their only shots this season as well. I think Red Bull are just so strong that this track is a bit of an outlier and therefore anything can happen. And those two teams, Ferrari, like you say, Jack, and Aston Martin, I think are the ones that could cause a bit of a problem.
Jolyon, how about you?
I mean, both very decent mentions, but I'm with Jack. I think Leclerc is the guy this weekend. And actually, I think I'd go even further. I think he might even be, one of the favourites for the race this weekend.
Really?
When you look at he took a double pole in Baku, which is a street circuit where the Ferrari was particularly good in the low speed corners and were losing time to the Red Bull in the fast corners or the straights. And Monaco is only low speed, where Ferrari have always been good. And Leclerc's always been fast, even if he's had a huge amount of bad luck. So if he gets on pole, the Ferrari are terrible in the races. The degradation is really high, and that's why they can't fight the Red Bulls there. But it doesn't matter in Monaco as well, or it matters less. So if Leclerc can put it on pole, which I think he can, I think he can win. So I'm saying 3-horse race, the 2 Red Bulls and Leclerc. I might even plump for Leclerc as a slight favourite.
Okay,
Bit of a rogue one.
I tell you what, if Alonso wins, Rosanna, then I'm going to be I'm going to be deeply impressed with you.
I'm just believing what I'm hearing, and that's always foolish. Fake news.
There's a lot of
Fernando.
there's good buzz about Aston Martin at the moment as well.
There definitely is. Yes, even Lance Stroll's cracking a smile.
Yeah, exactly. And they've announced that they're getting a new engine manufacturer as well, coming in 2026. Honda returning to Formula One after they haven't really quite left yet, because they left at the end of 2021 and then sort of helped Red Bull still, but now are kind of coming back. So it's a bit of a strange scenario, that whole Honda situation. But they'll be joining Aston Martin in 2026, which will be very interesting. And another new, well, not a new manufacturer on the grid, but one coming back at least. Yeah.
Before we go, we wanted to just say hello and send our love to Jenny Gow, who you may have seen speaking this week on The One Show. And also on 5 Live Breakfast, about her continued recovery from a really serious stroke which she suffered back in January, a part of our F1 team, of course. And Jack, you caught up with her this week, didn't you? You managed to have a chat with her.
Yeah, I spoke to her on the phone last Thursday, and she was on good form, and she told me that she was going to be on The One Show, and I didn't really, I didn't know that, and so I was like, oh, cool, but I forgot to ask her when. So then my grandma texted me on Monday, being like, oh, Jenny's on The One Show, so I turned it on. Oh, bawling I was. It was lovely to see her and Jamie and her family, doing so well and making good progress. And yeah, obviously we all wish her all the best. It's not the same not being with her with a glass of Sauvignon Blanc in Monaco. That's how I pictured Jen. Only one glass, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Rosanna, I'm sure you'll raise one to Jen out there as well over the weekend. And Jolyon, I'm sure wherever you are, you will do it as well. And Jenny spoke to share her story to mark Stroke Awareness Month, which is held through May. Thank you to Jolyon and to Rosanna. And Jack, the on-track action gets underway tomorrow.
Yeah, 12:25 is Free Practice 1, which you can hear on Sports Extra, and then Free Practice 2. The race getting underway Sunday afternoon, starts at 2 o'clock, which is going to be on 5 Live, or the start is anyway. So, and full coverage as ever on the BBC Sport website. And Andrew Benson will keep you up to date with everything as well.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Jack. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.